Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We still have people who are going to be straggling in, but that's fine. It's always hard to find this place. A couple of you have been here before, so you knew. I'm going to start with the thing I always forget, which is bathrooms, because it's very important and I always forget to talk about it. So, Oh, okay. There is a bathroom right here, conveniently. That's our fancy one. So that is, feel free. And then there are a few downstairs as well. I would ask as much as you can, try to save needing to go for the break. We're going to have a break. We're going to have pizza halfway through. We're going to scarf down the pizza and have time for bathroom and then come back together. So we just made only a 25-minute break in between for that. So if you can, know that break is coming and wait until then. But otherwise, you're welcome to. We're adults. Get up and do what you need to do. All right. So we usually run everything as a conversation. But today, as we were putting together the information for this, we realized that there's so much to cover that we don't really have much time for a back and forth today. At the same time, if you have a question that you think is relevant to everybody, please feel free to ask it at the time that we're discussing that topic. If you have a question that is relevant to you and your loved one, but maybe not everyone, please hold that question. There is actually scratch paper in your folder. Write down those questions because we probably do have an answer and we want to provide you with that answer. Just we'll do that later. Okay, so you can either give us that paper and we will email you the answers, or you can even just stay after and ask us those questions directly. But that's why the scratch paper is there, so that as we're going through, you can note the things that you still have questions about, right? Because we know that this topic is a big black box for a lot of people, right? And for a lot of families, this is the only time you're going to go through this, whereas we do this 10 times a day, right? So we have all this information that is brand new to you. And so that's why we put this together for you guys. And again, if you guys have questions that we don't cover today, we're the resource for that too, right? We can find an answer most likely to whatever those questions are. So please make sure that you ask us. And then the final thing that is housekeeping is just please put your phone on silent. Us too, if we didn't remember. We are recording, just the camera is right there so you guys know. So if you ask a question, the sound will be picked up, but your face will not. The camera is pointing directly up here, just so I like everybody to know if they're being recorded. So we are recording up here. The reason for that is that we have a lot of families who aren't in LA County, right? Who are in Riverside County and San Bernardino County, and in those counties in particular, we hear the phone. It's telling us. Particularly in those counties, there aren't very many resources, right? So we're going to be putting this recording on YouTube so that people have access to it as well. And you guys will also have access, then you can watch it again if there are follow-up questions. Doesn't sound like it's coming from the middle, actually. All right. So we're going to start just by very quickly introducing you guys to the room. So these are the things you're going to say. So like I said, it's going to be very quick. So just give us your name, your loved one's name, who is returning home soon, and about when you expect that to be. That's a sticky question for some of you. And for some of you, it's a really maybe more exact question, sort of, right? So there's a wide spectrum in that. So we don't need the mics for it. You can just say your name and the loved one and when you expect maybe for them to come home. We'll start here.
My name is Adrian. My husband's name is Steven, and he should be home in the next couple weeks. We're just waiting for him to get his paperwork with his release.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
My name is Gabriel, we're born on the 9th, so he should be home by January.
Yes.
Not really out there.
Right, great.
My name is Renelle. His name is Miguel. and we're waiting for the enhancements to come back, and then that should be by October.
My name is Kimberly and Arthur Montgomery, and my son is Aaron. And he contacted us and said he needed some stuff for parole for, we didn't know what, or how to start it.
Yeah.
I'm in a group, 10 toes in, and she supplied the information for us and we just jumped on it.
Yeah.
And we actually live in Oregon now. Well, we happen to be down here for some exercise service.
Well, yeah, great timing. Awesome. Do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Raphael. I love myself. I paroled on January 4th.
My name is Kimberly. My loved one's name is Michael. We have an expected date of possibly within the next 5 years if we don't possibly get a commutation or something like that. So just getting information on when he does come home is important.
Awesome. Great. You're being very proactive. Good.
My name is Elizabeth. My husband's name is Edwin. This is my son Joel. And we expect him to come home around April 2023.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Silvestre, and I have a lot of loved ones, a lot of dear friends that are, who knows who live in the role, a lot of key strikers. We still have a lot of years ahead, but I live young. And
I am Rosie, part of 10 Toes In. I'm here to support my daughter and niece. I did have a partner who passed away March 1st at Donovan.
Bobby? Do you want to say hello, Bobby?
I want to say good morning. My name's Bobby. I paroled September 2021. Last year, it's going to be your AOMC year.
Perfect timing, Tony. Just say hello. Yeah, just say your name.
Oh, my name's Carmen.
Oh, awesome. Good to have you with Tony. Awesome. Sophia?
My name is Sophia Teodoro, and I'm actually going to be presenting.
Yeah, awesome. Nice to meet you, Sophia. So this is the team. This is Joseph, outreach coordinator. If you have questions about housing or resources later on, he's going to be your main man. And Roberto, and I'll just say your names right now, actually. Roberto, Darlene will be joining us soon, sometime. And Melissa and Joel, and I'm Joelle. And then Todd is back there in the corner as well, doing our tech today. So we're going to go ahead and jump in then. And our first topic takes us right back to what you guys in the middle just brought up, which is preparing for parole. So we're going to talk very quickly about what that looks like on your side, and then we'll move on through the agenda. And as we go today, I'm just going to kind of read out the topic, and then we'll move through that way so that we can signpost where we are on the agenda throughout.
Good morning, everyone. So, how to prepare for the board, or what's the process look like? I know that this is a time where, especially for the loved ones, it can be written with anxiety, with a lot of stress, with a lot of worry, and maybe with some fear. One of the best ways to manage anxiety or fear, in my case, and I'm gonna use that as an example, was to kind of like understand the process, and giving you a picture of that hopefully helps you. So what is the board? The board is referred to as a BPH, which is the Board of Prison Hearing, or Parole Hearing. And it's comprised of a commissioner and a deputy commissioner. And who's present at the board is your loved one with his attorney, a correctional officer, you have the commissioner, the deputy commissioner, you have the DA, and sometimes the victim's family is also in that room. So what are they going to determine? They're going to determine suitability, whether your loved one is suitable for parole. And another determination is whether your loved one is not, or he does not pose a current or an unreasonable risk of danger to the public. So that's kind of like the criteria that they use. What you can help him with is his reentry plan. And what is that? What is the reentry plan? So usually what this looks like is like letters of support. And it's basically to meet his basic needs when he gets out, which is housing, employment, and also a support network, which is going to be your support network. And these can be letters of acceptance for housing, or how you're going to support him, or how is he going to be supported in that, with address, location. Another thing is also employment. Where is he? Who's going to give him a job? And a letter of employment of that support is also helpful. Your support network, letters of how are they going to meet his like emotional need, his moral support, also emotional support. So these are all letters that you can gather up. And you're going to be a big part of helping him also with his prevention, his relapse prevention plan. So he's going to need location, names, and addresses of probably classes, programs, and again, the moral support letters. Another thing that you can help him with is information as far as like transportation, like the mode of transportation, whether he's going to use public transit or he's going to be gifted a car. How is he going to get that, or the money to use public transportation? And also another thing is the route. How is he going to know the route? So you can help him maybe with Google Maps and give him that information. Another way you can help him is also with his goals. What's his 6-month goals? Like, is he going to get a checking, a banking like credit, or how is he going to build his credit? So you can help them with these things. And this is what that process looks like.
I will say too, before I hand the mic to you, Melissa, that one thing I didn't understand about the system is that it's very much treated like everybody has a substance abuse problem. And so the language around it is very much that everyone has a substance abuse problem. So whether your loved one does or not, like you might have noticed that Joel said a relapse prevention plan. That language is borrowed from that background, right? So whether he or she ever had a substance abuse problem, you almost have to pretend that that is the case a little bit, or like think in that way. And so you're building a plan around that too. And so same thing when people are on parole, they might have to go to NA or AA or those types of groups, even though there's no substance history. And so that's a way that you can be really helpful in preparing, is finding those groups near to where they're going to be living and setting up, even like looking up the schedule, because those things are incredibly important at the hearing, so that they have like that plan. Like, these are the meetings I'm going to attend. This is where those meetings are going to be. This is how often I'm going to be there. And again, that's like whether they had a problem or not, whether that's, in their history or not, that is a thing that could be really helpful.
And in your guys' folders, there is, for like the letters of support, there is a template and what that really looks like, a real actual written one. And there's also a toolkit prepared, and I also have other toolkits as well, helping to prepare for board and what that looks like. And also to prepare for in advance. When your loved one's coming home, I know some of folks, your loved one's coming home soon. So if they do not have a social security card, birth certificate, or ID, we call those the working docs. Those are the golden 3. For you, ma'am, with your son, like, because you are the mother, you're able to get the birth certificate a lot easier. So that's something to keep in mind. I know when my fiance was coming home, I was able to actually go online to the DMV and just renew his ID. Actually his driver's license. So some folks may have some like barriers with that if they've had a DUI in the past, which we've worked with a lot of folks, like we're talking from the 70s, it still haunts them. So Those are the things to check out online to see if you're able to at least get a renewal ID online. You can send for birth certificate. All that is in the packet exactly in this Your Welcome Home, your first 30 days. It gives the website and how to actually go through everything. So those are really like the first three, because I've worked in reentry for over 20 years, and that's always been the biggest barrier for when folks do come home, because they can't proceed to the next thing and they have to wait, which we all know DMV, especially during COVID, is taking a lot longer. Social Security is a lot longer. And Vital Check is the online platform for the birth certificate. So we're always here to help you guys with that process as well. And so there's those types of things. And then also too, when you know that they're gonna go to a transitional home, whether they're gonna come out on MCRP program or go straight to the transitional, I got a little too excited personally and bought a ton of stuff, which we still have. I think we have hygiene for 5 years, Bobby. I went crazy and bought a lot of stuff because I was so excited. To save your dollars, honestly, I would wait. Wait till they come home, or I shouldn't say home, wait till they go to the transitional house, because you don't know which one they're going to till the day of, because they don't let them know, especially if they're on MCRP program, they won't let them know because they're still in custody. And so my advice, because they will give them a sheet of what to buy. Some of them are allowed food, some of them are not. So just that type of thing in the back of the mind. I know for me, we just bought him a package right before he came home on MCRP, and it was like he already had hygienes and laundry soap and those types of nature. So mainly like the real clothing is exciting, but I would still hold off on that because they don't know what size they are. Maybe the shoe size is like the thing, but even then, really to kind of like put yourself on a budget, because I kind of went too crazy. So I would just honestly wait till they get there, and then they give you that phone call, and to actually help them with their anxiety of not like, it's okay, you're gonna be able to give them a drop off, because some transitionals, you're only allowed to drop off like every month or so, or every quarter, depending on what transitional it is, so.
Yeah, and Joel, can you talk to us a little bit about the timeline, if they're found suitable or if it's determinate sentence, like what does that timeline look like?
Yes, if the parole board has made a decision for your loved ones who do not have a 187 or a homicide, is 120 days of review. An additional 30 days for those who is a 187, so it's 150 days. The governor also has 90 days prior to his release date to actually send the decision back to the parole board, or they can either reverse it or modify it without sending them back for review to the parole board. So that's kind of like the timeline.
Yeah, and it's important to know, even though it is a very difficult thing to know, that it can be reversed, and that happens multiple times for some people. So just being found suitable isn't the end of the line. You're still waiting for a governor's action, and that's what he was referring to.
If there's a denial, it would be 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, or 15 years. He can now request an advancement as well if he gets denied.
And a lot of people are getting their advancements approved. So even if there's a 3-year denial, he or she might go back to parole board in like a year and a half, actually, something like that. So again, it's all, no matter what's written down, and it's not the thing itself. And so just know that too, and be a little bit flexible. And then also I will say that it's supposed to be, and this is even legislated, it's supposed to be 150 days from being found suitable to being released, but we're finding, particularly in the last 3 months, that that's not happening. People are getting out at like 153, 155, which should technically not be allowed, but it's happening. And I think when you're down to those last few days, like you're going through right now, that's so nightmarish, kind of, because every day really counts and is really scary. So,
can I comment to that? Yeah. I actually called the board of parole to ask them about that time. And they basically said it's an arbitrary number, and it's no longer 150, and we're looking more at 180. Oh my God! For the governor to make his decision. So I was under the assumption that once they got to that point, it was like, you gotta go. But
yeah, it's written. Like I've seen the code, so like when they say things like that, you're like arbitrary. Yeah, but do know, like, they kind of, the answer is, like, parole kind of owns the process. So, you know, as frustrating as it is, like, yeah.
Right, the longest I've heard is 164 so far.
Yeah. You're almost there. Good. All right. And then the one thing that I would say that we often see families purchase in advance, which is incredibly helpful, is a cell phone. So you guys know that life is run by a smartphone, so it is really helpful to have a smartphone in advance for your loved one. If you can put them on your family plan so that they have full data, that is really, really helpful. We argue about what type of phone is best for them, but I would say that, like, especially if you're on a budget, they don't need an iPhone. You know, if you can get something more affordable, that's great. But it is worth it to have a smartphone that actually works, because they're going to be really frustrated with technology anyway. And then for there to be the further frustration of their cell phone not being a good one is really difficult, right? Because really our lives run on that thing. Particularly if you're in transitional, that might be the only device they have. They might not have a computer. So it's worth it to purchase a better phone, something around probably like the $250 to $300 range is a really decent smartphone that will work enough. But that's about what if you're on a budget, that's about what you'd probably be looking at spending. All right, so let's talk about the pickup now, preparing for the day of, and then what that day looks like.
Yeah. Speaking from experience, the pickup can be something very stressful for your loved one, especially because now the question is, everyone wants to pick him up. And that's something that you cannot stress him more than he already is. Please, let him have, like, this day is his day, and let him pick who he wants. This is very stressful, and I know I get it, especially with family members. I mean, this is something that he doesn't need when he's getting out and he's getting ready. He's full of emotions, and he's gonna have a lot to deal with on that day. So, please.
And you might have to intervene, like, where some of you, your loved one might be like, I don't even know what you call it, like organization famous. Like, this is a thing that we're seeing, like if they're in one of the programs or something, and then like the program wants to be there, and the program wants to have a film crew, and the program has a van. And so there's just like a ton of, I don't know, kerfuffle around them getting out. And like probably what they want is two people that they really love. They probably don't want all of that. And you might have to intervene on their behalf because they feel beholden to that program or beholden to these extended family members, right? And they might not feel like they have the right to say no or to advocate for themselves. So that might be something that like you should advocate on their behalf. But that might affect you too. Like maybe you're not, I mean, everybody in here is like pretty close to the person, but maybe you're not the person that they want, like picking them up either. And like you need to take a deep breath and be okay. Yeah, but that's a really difficult, stressful thing. Yeah. Okay, and then what is the day of release like, Roberto?
Hi. So I think from my own experience, and then from just learning about everybody else's experience and the work we do, the experience could be very different. It depends whether you are released from a state prison or if you are released from a county jail. So those are two very different release experiences. But for the individual, it's, you know, you wake up the next morning, it's another day, but you know you're going home that day. You probably didn't sleep. I know I didn't sleep. I probably slept like 2 hours the day before. I was just so excited. And I couldn't believe like this is really happening. I was a former lifer. I did 28 years inside. So, you know, having that day come, it's a huge roller coaster of emotions. And it's been my experience, and what I have learned with talking to some of my former lifers, friends, is that you're kind of numb to everything. You really are. You're kind of numb to the experience because it's like an out of body experience as you're walking through those gates. But I think having a plan is very important. Knowing your route, knowing where you're going to stop for lunch or a dinner, locating a store where you can purchase clothes. It's helpful to plan like in that way and keep it as simple as possible. And I think it helps to go in and from the moment that you are reunited with your loved one to begin to empower them, right? Like it was just like, if you walk into a store and, there's 500 different pants on the rack, it could be very overwhelming, but just be patient with them and have them get fitted, have them learn their size, have them begin to start doing those steps on their own. I've seen a lot of families, they have clothes already for them, and they're like, you're gonna wear this, and you should try on that, and it takes away, even though you're really trying to hug them and love them and give them everything that you can. It really is more beneficial for them to have that experience of just kind of learning those baby steps. So yeah, I would say that's kind of what you expect on release day. And please don't, if they're crying like crazy, great. If they're laughing like crazy, great. If they're quiet and don't want to say a word, great. Because it's just that roller coaster of emotions. And a lot of times what I see families start doing is like, something's wrong with him. He's not happy. We got to make him happy. We got to make him laugh. No, you just being there in the day happening, that's all. Let them have their emotions, whatever they are. And we're all different, right? We all have different DNA. And so whatever that emotion is, just let them embrace it and let them have their moment. And, it's going to be okay.
Melissa, I'll have you say a little bit about, your experience on the other side. Like, I know you've had both sides, but you recently had the experience as the loved one.
Yeah, so when my fiance came home, he actually went to the MCRP program for a whole year. And so that was stressful, right, going through that. But the day we went to go pick him up, it was like, it was exciting, super exciting. But just letting him take that time for him, like what Roberto said, for himself to, I guess, collect himself or like enjoy, being free. Spit off real quick. I think, did you drive home, Bobby? No, yeah. I didn't remember. I think we were like, that was our discussion. Are you going to drive away or not, But it's exciting. It's nervous. I didn't get much sleep either that night picking him up, even though I was able to visit towards the last, because during COVID, visiting someone in transitional wasn't happening. So we didn't have that like baby steps to being released, right? I know when I personally was released, it was hard because I had to hurry up and be in the transitional home. I did federal time, so I had to hurry up and see my baby and see my loved ones and hurry up and go to the transitional homes and be on lockdown again. So there's those instances too where you see your loved one for a little bit and then boom, they're back on within the transitional, which we'll go over. So it's kind of that emotional, like you just had that little taste of freedom and then they're back on lockdown real quick in their transitional home. So it's just, once again, I think just being patient and just being there for them to listen. Yeah, that's about it. The food. Just be careful with the food.
Yeah.
Don't overwhelm them with food. I know I got sick.
Yeah. I think that's an important part of it too, is physically their bodies, and this happens to us pretty quickly when people are incarcerated, your eyes stop having the same amount of stimulation. your stomach doesn't have rich food, right? And there's no driving around in cars. That's the way that we do. So all of those things are going to be like physically coming at them too. So that's a thing for you to be aware of. A lot of people are car sick on the ride home. A lot of times just the trees going by, the things going by, that's a new cognitive thing, particularly if you're dealing with someone who did more than, a couple decades. Their brains have actually rewired to not be having that constant stimulation. So you should be aware of that they are actually being overwhelmed by physical sensations. And the same thing when they go into a store, all those colors. I mean, if you've seen pictures of prison, imagine that juxtaposed with Walmart, the aisle in Walmart, right? You have that wide range of colors. There's nothing colorful like that for those long years, right? Recently, they're getting murals, but before that, it's just like one color. So all of that's happening, and then the digestive system too, just not used to rich foods. So, we, as much as you might want to be like, taste all this stuff, like, have some Imodium ready too.
Yeah, I was about to say, have some Pepto-Bismol in the car and Dramamine for the car sickness.
Okay. And Roberto, do you want to talk to us about parole a little bit?
So
parole probation.
Yeah. Upon your release, you're usually given 24 hours before you have to check in with your parole agent. That means that you're going to go down to the office and you'll wait there and you'll see your parole agent, and your parole agent will make you sign some documents and basically give you your parole conditions. Each parole conditions of an individual could be different, just depending on the case, on the individual. For example, one of my conditions, it said that I had to stay away from my victims, and what was the other one? I had to stay within a 50-mile radius of my address, my official address. That's not your address, it's the address of the transitional home. So it has to be a radius within approximately 50 miles. And a lot of people get that confused because you go on Google and you'll say, okay, it takes me 15 miles to get from here to their house, but it's a straight 50 miles. So there is an app, I forgot what it's called. Todd, if you can, maybe it's called How the Crow Flies, where you can find the distance between 2 points in a straight line. Yeah, and that's the app that the parole agents use. I believe it's How the Crow Flies. So yeah, and then again, the conditions vary. So it's always good to make sure that they know exactly what are their specific parole conditions, that they read them and that they understand them. Parole agents are very different. They're people. So you may have a parole agent who's awesome, who's very attentive, going to give you tons of resources, or you may get a parole agent who just wants to see you once a month and does not want to hear anything else from you, from your loved one. They don't want to know what you're doing. They don't want to, they're just going to see you. Hey, you're here. Here's your housing. Great. Okay, I'm out of here. How you're doing? Fine. Good. Bye. And then you'll have other parole agents who are a little bit more hands-on. That's just how it is right now. Parole agents are people too. One more thing. What else I'd like to say about that? There's a handout that we included, so I won't sit here and go over the handout line by line, but the handout is very helpful. And yeah, just make sure that you also get the parole agent's information, that you write it down, that you have it handy, that you have his or her contact information. And if you have any questions, always reach out to the parole agent. If your loved one wants to go somewhere, take a trip, again, have them reach out, have them text, have them email, and things like that. So.
The other parole condition that might affect you and that you would have control over too, and this one's kind of rare, but it's difficult, is one where they can't be around alcohol, and that includes restaurants that serve it. And so then you have to be kind of mindful, even when you're planning, that if they have that condition, that they're not actually, if there's a bar at the restaurant, they're not supposed to be at that restaurant. So that one's really a pain, and it doesn't crop up that often, but it does show up sometimes. So yeah, 5B. Okay, yeah, and I would say it's like pretty rare, but
I have it.
You have it.
It's only if the business is their primary business.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can't go to a restaurant to label a bar.
Right.
You can't
Right.
go to a liquor store.
And that's where like Yard House, for example, might be like liminal, right? So like you would have to think about that as a thing. But good, thank you. And then the other thing I would say that in helping them prepare for that first meeting with parole is that sometimes I have seen the parole agent trying to trigger them in the first encounter. So they just got out, and a lot of times people think that parole is very helpful, and sometimes parole is helpful, but it's largely punitive. Like, it's still a part of the punishment instead of help. And it was created to be helpful. Like, I like to throw that out there all the time. The purpose of parole was to do what we do. It was to help people reenter. But it has become more of like a watch program sometimes. So sometimes in that very first meeting, one, they're not even meeting with their own PO sometimes, because maybe their parole agent is out of office or, is maybe on vacation that day. And so they're meeting with whoever is the agent on duty, on desk or whatever. And that person isn't going to be particularly friendly with them. And sometimes the PO's MO is to be brusque, even if they're not going to be like that in the long run. They will push at them in that first meeting to kind of test out the person who's on their caseload. So it's really important for your loved one to know that might happen, because if they know, they can come in prepared for that and like use all their coping skills. But if they don't know and they think that they're walking into something friendly, that can be really difficult. So I want to put that out there so that you can kind of help them prepare for that moment too.
Also, too, they will drug test. So I know a lot of my friends going out to dinner, having a beer or a glass of wine. Some parole agents may not be so caring if they had alcohol in their system, but just to keep that in mind, their first, actually, usually when they go see their parole at any time, but usually the first, I've seen it many, many times where they'd get out on a Friday and have that whole weekend with family. They have a surprise party and they drink that week and see parole Monday and then get violated right away. So just be careful of that if that is in any situation, just to be on their P's and Q's with that.
It's you, Joel. So we're going to talk next about transitional housing, and maybe say a little bit about MCRP too, because a lot of people might be on MCRP and what that is, and then the range of what transitional housing might look like.
MCRPs are also, they're designated as, they're still in custody, but they're in the community now. And so they're usually housed also in transitional housings, which they can share with people who are on parole and who have been mandated to be on transitional housing for 6 years. And 6 months, yes, 6 years. It's 6 months. Yeah, and depending on if he still needs housing support, he can ask for an extension, and usually they'll give you a 3-month extension. But so there's a different range of transitional housings. We have one range, which is an outlier to the left, which is very strict, and depending on your loved one's needs, he may want that or he may need it. And what that looks like is 30-day blackout, meaning that he has no contact, sometimes not even via phone, so he won't be able to use a phone. And he'll have a blackout period, meaning that he won't be able to go out from that transition, and all he'll do is do programming in that transition. And usually it's just for 30 days. And there's also another range of maybe 60 days before he can get a job. So that's another thing too that you have to, accommodate him with. Maybe he won't be as available to you as you would want him. So, and this can be very stressful, especially for loved ones, because now in your mind, he's home, he's free. This feels like I'm back in visiting room or I'm back in prison. So just be patient with that. This is just one of the outliers to the left, I said. And then you have another outlier, which this transitional house, there is no blackout period. He can, on the day of, he can probably already start working and start moving around. He'll have visitations like weekend passes for visitation with his loved ones. And the other extreme, you won't have weekend visitations until maybe your 90th day or 60th day, depending if you have employment. So those are all privileges that come with transitional housing. So just like knowing and preparing yourself for it is going to be, believe me, it's going to help you a lot. And like I said, it depends on his needs. He may need a stricter program so that he can transition in a safe way and healthy way. For others, they don't need that and they're just ready to hit the ground running, but it all depends on what his needs are.
And I would say that you can be the best person to kind of find out the right information about that over someone who's inside, because there's a lot of misinformation about transitional housing in the prison system. And by that I mean, like, some of the worst programs have really fancy pamphlets. And so they make it look really nice. And so people think, oh, that's a great program, right? And they don't know that they're coming to something kind of terrible. So the only way to really know, like, which ones they should be applying to and which ones they should rank for their hearing is to ask. Ask us, and we'll be really honest with you about what the programs are like, and then you can tell us kind of what their needs are like. When they go to the parole board hearing, they will write down transitional housing in order, and that it really matters. I cannot stress that enough. Like, we have housing, so if somebody doesn't put us down as their number one when they go to the hearing, they will not come to us. Like, I'll have to move, I would maybe be able to move them over to us after 3 months. Whatever they put down, that's the first choice of parole unless the beds are full, right? Then they go down the list. So it actually really matters what they write down when they go to their hearing, okay? Right now, the beds are full, so you might get stuck anywhere. But again, like, if you have done the work of finding a place where the beds don't fill up in advance and you wrote that down, great. I will put a caveat on all of that, though. Still, their parole officer still gets to choose if they end up there, though. And that's happened for us. So I had a guy who was accepted into our housing program, had done all the work, had, CDCR had called me multiple times, and he was supposed to come to us. But when it came all the way to the parole agent, he asked me if I drug test, and I said no, and that guy did not come to my housing. So the parole officer still has the last say, ultimately. So that's where the flexibility can come in. All right, the next topic then is moving on from transitional housing. Like, when is it a good idea for your loved one to move home? What does that look like, and what are some of the pitfalls? And so we've got an incredible panel of people who are experts in this, and we're just going to pass the mic down. I think, Roberto, do you want to start, and then Darlene, or vice versa?
I'll let Darlene introduce herself.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Darlene Lucca, and I've been doing reentry work for quite a bit of time. So I have a lot of experience and insight on this particular thing. So when's a good time for your loved one to move in with you? I'm just going to give you the honest answer, which is it varies. And sometimes we want our family members to come home to us right away, but that may not be the best thing for them. Doing this work, I've seen a lot of family members become very anxious for their loved one to be home with them, right? They want certain things. They want that family connection. They want that financial the assistance. But there's a lot of unpacking that a lot of people need to do prior to really diving into that family and home dynamic. Because incarceration and what individuals deal with in those systems, in the carceral system, they're not used to it. They haven't had a lot of practice in it, right? So when that individual feels comfortable and able to leave, right, I think is probably the best time for them to come home. If they're coming from a transitional home, obviously the 6 months, as Joel had talked about, folks have talked about 6 months, like a lot of people, especially if they have spent decades inside prison, need that 6 months. That's just the honest truth. They need that 6 months to reintegrate, understand, and feel and practice all of the nuances of this new life. So be patient with them as they figure that out. Be supportive of them. Help them by affirming that this looks like the right choice for you, right? Yes, I do want you home. However, this may not be the best right now because they haven't had that experience.
Yeah. No, so just for full transparency here, Darlene, my name is Roberto Lucca. Darlene's my wife. We've been married 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
Almost
yes.
2 years. Better get that right. And you know, I think from what I have learned and from what I have seen and in my own experience, when most of us, and I'll say us, you know, most of your loved ones come home, what we want to do is we want to get started with life, right? And we want to get started with life as soon as possible. We want to work, and we want to start making money, and we want to be the man, and we want to take care of mom, and we want to take care of dad, and we want to give back to our nieces and nephews, and we want to do all these great things, which is really good. However, in that rush, sometimes we miss like doing a lot of self-processing, a lot of learning. So I've been out 5 years, and I am still struggling to this day with a home environment because I never had a home, number one. Well, I did have a home, but I never had a proper home, maybe. I think that's what I want to say. I don't know even if that exists, a proper home. But I never felt comfortable at home. You know, my childhood, like many, weren't the best for us. But so now we're trying to model better behavior and trying to communicate and trying to use my coping skills. But I still get triggered. And definitely it's important for your loved one, if they're going to come home, that they have their own space, that they have their own room, that they have an area that could like be theirs. I've seen in a lot of our guys and even gals, they move into someone's home, but there's already 3 kids and grandma and dad, and that's too much. It's too much too fast. So it takes time to learn how to communicate, you know, and those are just like some of the things that I'm touching on, that the time, right, that it takes to be able. So when is the right time? It depends on the person. It depends on the individual. So yeah, just say that.
Yeah, there's just so many different dynamics that they haven't practiced. Robert mentioned kids, right? And so, especially for an individual that has spent or grew up in prison and didn't have the interaction with children, right? That might be a struggle. How do I step into this home and parent these children that I haven't really raised, right? And so communication can look differently. I'll give you an example of when I worked as a life coach in another organization. There was this individual who was just really excited to go home. He was like, man, why do I have to spend this time in transitional home? I'm just ready, blah, 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 right? Finally got a pass to go home. Went home for the weekend and was like, oh, I realize why I'm here, right? And I need this space. Because that's what they're used to, is having their own space. So Robert talked about making sure that they have their own space. You know, a cell is theirs. They claim it however they operate in that, just like us, right? We have our own ways of doing things. And when they're stepping into somebody else's space, that individual didn't really know how to operate. He had his own way of doing things. His partner had their way of doing things, and there was just a clash because of the communication that they thought they were having, but didn't necessarily happen. And then there was children in the mix, right? And so how do I communicate with this child that in full transparency, you know, I have an older son, and Robert's not used to dealing with a 20-year-old, like a normal 20-year-old, right? The 20-year-old that he dealt with, 20-year-old male that he dealt with was inside of prison. So we had to have very particular conversations of like, this is normal. Like, it's okay if he played video games. Like, he doesn't have to be doing push-ups at 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, it's all right, you know? It's okay if his room is a bit messy or disorganized, because he's not, that is not just his only space, right? And this is a safe space for him to do and just be, right? So
I'm dealing with that now. No, having a blended family too, depending on your situation. If your loved one didn't have children and they're coming into already established home, I'm very OCD in some ways, and I have very, you know, we run our own program, right? As women, we've been handling things, doing things the way we've been doing it, and then here comes our loved one coming home and is trying to do the same. And so it clashes. And like what Darlene was saying, how do you have those conversations, which we'll go over in our conversations, but also to the children, right? And I think it's, for me, I've had to like check myself and being patient and mindful that he's not used to it, right? He's not used to it. I'm not used to it. That transitional period to take time for yourself to start adjusting, because even without having someone incarcerated coming into your space, just having a new relationship is difficult. So imagine somebody coming from a very structured and programmed and not a lot of options and decision making can be difficult for them. So just being patient and understanding and communicating very well, because I think I communicate well, but apparently I don't. So I have to like be very clear and concise in what I say and how I say it too. My tone, I can be very snappy, you know, so it's just watching that, because they come from a very different world, you know, where respect and our tones and even certain words that we say. So being mindful, and I think having like family meetings is a great thing, which I'm going to establish more. But just being on the same page and actually asking like, is this, you know, something you like to participate in or not? And not just having those expectations too high, because that's something I have done, is had such high expectations just on the natch, and meeting them where they're at. It's okay if they're not going to work right away. It's okay if they don't want to participate in family things or do certain things that you want to do. Because I was so excited to do X, Y, and Z. We talked about it, but now we're not doing it. And not to get disappointed and maybe start, having those unhealthy conversations of what that looks like.
So in your folder, you will find a kind of fancier looking handout, the Welcome Home handout, and it's 2 pages. The first is your first 30 days, and then the second is your next 3 months. And we made this quite a while ago, but I think it's such a helpful resource. And we're just Roberto and Darlene are gonna kind of walk through it out loud a little bit, just touching on things where there might be questions. Darlene, I guess I'll give you the kind of lead on doing that. But as Melissa was saying, like, it's a lot about managing your expectations and understanding like what the steps are that one needs to take. And I would encourage you, if you want, we've got a bunch more copies. I would encourage you to send this handout in to your loved one too, because it will help them as well. But you should keep the copy as well. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Darlene and Roberto to kind of just walk us through it briefly, and then make sure that you look it over as well.
So expectations, as Melissa said, sometimes we have expectations as family members. I would just recommend to be like very fluid in those expectations. So prior to release, some of the things that you can help them with is locating their birth certificate and social security card in order to help them, once they come home, apply for different benefits and an ID card. Also, helping them figure out where they're going to be sleeping the first night or two. If they're not going into a transitional home, then what is the plan there? So if they're going directly to your home, right, then where is their space that they could claim? Like, what does that look like? Help them think about, like, even like what kind of linen do you like? Do you like sleeping on silk? No, what's it? What is it?
Yeah. So the other thing, and like line up your resources. Well, you're already here. You're doing that now, and that's a great way to start. But you have some information there where you can find some other great resources. Just connect with different orgs. We handed out some resources to you, so that's great. Post-release. So when someone is released from prison, they usually get a card. They'll get a card, and it'll have $200 that they can access through the card. And it's through an ATM machine. So step 2, it says get your benefits. So the way that happens is mostly if they're in a transitional housing, there are very good transitional housings, and they'll have a life coach that'll help them walk through getting their benefits and getting their EBT and Medi-Cal and things like that. The Medi-Cal, that should already happen before release. They have healthcare workers now that go inside and they sign them up for Medi-Cal, and usually they'll ask them what address to give them, and they'll send a card to that address. But that's important. And also the benefits, connect with different organizations. We have individuals walk through our doors weekly, sometimes daily, and they don't have no benefits. They don't have an email. So that's what we do, right? We sit down here with them and we create an email account with them first, and then we'll walk them through signing them up with their benefits. And actually, I'm gonna give that over to Melissa because she's a pro at it. So
For the benefits, you can do it online. I think I did it right when he was about to come home. So there was certain things that you can do as a loved one. Like I said, getting the ID. If they don't have anything, you can actually go online for them and create those. Also, too, if you ever create an account for them, write it down what it's to, the username and password, please. Because eventually, let's say they are in transitional and you've created an email for them, like on Gmail, give them that information if that's something. It's very crucial because when they are going through, let's say, other reentry orgs, like if it's not us, it's someone else. What if they want to go back to college and they cannot access those passwords or get a hold of you in a certain time? That's very stressful. Like I said, when it comes to the public benefits, we have really good resources here, but I know other people live elsewhere. So you can go online to DPSS and sign up for the cash aid, which is the general relief and of that nature for them in advance, depending. Like I said, everyone's situation is different. So certain transitionals, they can't. If they're on MCRP, they can't. If they're coming home, these are the things to walk them through. And I personally like to show the individual what I'm doing so they can see what I'm doing and not just I used to always just do everything for everybody, and that wasn't empowering them to do it, right? So they may not be technologically sound, but at least have them some agency in what you guys are doing together, because this is something for them in that. And what else?
So we already talked a little bit. We talked a little bit about your visiting your parole agent, figuring out where you're gonna sleep. We talked a little bit about that in transitional housing, the different type of programs there is. Transportation, it would be really great if you can and you can afford it. It's in your budget to have a tap card ready, a bus card ready also for your loved one coming home. And not to get too much lost in the weeds, but that's also very important is, sitting down and learning how to use Google Maps and how to understand the bus routes, but then also take into consideration the safety. We live in a big city, a big hustling, bustling city, and it could be very overwhelming. And, frankly, there's just some areas that I would not want anyone, it's sad to say, but it's true. If I have a loved one, after certain hours, I'll be like, no, I don't think you should be taking the bus in that area. So always keep mindful of those things. Clothing, most transitional housings will provide them with something the first few days to help them out. And then there's also a lot of resources, and again, we can help you with locating those resources. Create a system for making and saving passwords. Melissa talked about that a little bit already. Make sure you save. If you create an email account for them, please save the password. Give them their password so they can already start familiarizing themselves with that. Set up an account and get your ID. So if they have a birth certificate and another proof of identification, they could just go right down to a V, and within a couple hours they can get their ID. The cell phone, we talked about that already, and what that looks like. There are what they call, for a lack of better terms, the Obama phone. I think it was before Obama though. But that policy came out. But yeah, so those, if they'll be able to access one of those immediately, if you can't get them a phone right away. Social security card, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone here in this room has actually tried to get a social security card during the pandemic. It has been horrible for our population to get that, because in order, since they didn't take anyone, you just can't walk in. So what was been happening is that they would get their ID and birth certificate, fill out the application, drop it off with the ID and social, right? The original, not copies, with the application, and wait for it to come in the mail. And so that is just terrifying. This is their first form of real ID and everything, and then they can't do anything with it, right? And usually parole conditions too is you have to have your ID on you, and so they're freaking out. We've been able, luckily, it's been a little bit more better, but where I know the Long Beach one has been easy for just to drop off, because what's happening when you guys get a cell phone, I personally can't go on because my cell phone is under a family plan under my dad, and so I tried to go get a renewal of my social security card, a duplicate, and I can't because that's how they are able to do the online portal is if the cell phone's under your name. So that's tricky why we can't do it under our name, like get it online, which is the quickest way. So going to the Social Security office is really, really, there's a lot of challenges and barriers. So that's something just to keep in mind. What I've actually had some folks do, if they've had a driver's license before, when they went to DV, we got a driver's license and an ID. So when we did the mail off or drop off, because some, I know Long Beach, we can drop it off in their little mailbox thing. And then they'll usually call to either come pick it up or mail it. We've had some folks where it never did get mailed back. And so that's just something to keep in mind, to have maybe an extra ID or whatnot. So it's kind of hard because they said you can call, make an appointment, but no one picks up. So that's been very difficult. So that's really going to be like the biggest challenge. And that's something that they do need when they want to start working. So just to keep that in mind with that. So if you guys ever need, like I said, support with that, we're always here to help you guys and what that looks like when time comes.
A couple of things that I wanted to mention is that Robert had talked about the cell phone, and there are low-cost plans that individuals can sign up for, which will lower their bill to $30 a month if they do get a cell phone plan. That's through the California Lifeline program. That's separate from the Obama phone. In addition, in regards to their housing, individuals that are paroling are eligible for stop-funded housing. So if they're not paroling to your home or transitional home, or there is after their transitional home, there isn't a place for them to go home to, stop-funded sober livings are available to them that their parole agent can connect them to. So I know some family members, they may not have space for their loved one, and so these are some alternatives that they can tap into. Also the transportation, there is called a LIFE program, where it's a low-income program for them to get a cheaper monthly cost.
Another tip on the cell phone. I used to manage the transitional housing program for young people that were coming back home. And sometimes what was happening was that people were getting calls from random numbers saying, hey, you've been a victim of social security fraud. Give us all your information. And because folks didn't have, we know, right? We know that not to answer certain calls. But for folks that are coming back home and they want to be in compliance with anything, they're like, yes, definitely, I'll give you all my information. So now not only are they going through the process of getting these documents, but now they also have to report that they're victims of fraud and start this other process that can be a whole nightmare. So just be mindful of that and informing that community.
Yes, that is very important. I would say like half of our guys have been victims of one or the other types of scam. So we talk about scams a lot around here. So, you want to point it out to them, like, don't give out information if someone calls you. Only give information if you're the one who made the call, right? Like, that's the basic thing you should let them know. Just very transparently too, like if they're going to be on dating apps, let them know like what that looks like, and that a lot of scams happen that way, and just even familiarizing them with the types of scams that are out here in the world, because they don't know. And like she said, like they're trying to be so compliant. So particularly they fall prey to the, like, this is the IRS, or the ones that are like, there's a warrant out for your arrest, right? If you don't do this, we're going to do this. And so we've had a guy lose like 12 grand over someone thinking that he had a warrant out for his arrest, right? So I know it sounds like, but when you're scared so much of the system, like it makes sense. And so also, people prey on people who are incarcerated. That's like where identity theft happens. So there are huge lists of people who have done time, and it doesn't stop when they get out, right? So they're still like the number one focus of these scams. So it's really important to just kind of talk to them about it right away and familiarize them with what's happening now. Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's a particular one, people asking to buy gift cards is a really common scam now. And like, if you're not familiar with that, it sounds like, well, that's too specific to be a scam, right? But that's how a lot of them run now. So anything to do with a gift card, you know, is generally scam. Yeah. Transportation, a little bit. Do you want to say a little bit about that, Roberto, about how to get around and buying cars and stuff like that?
So I think number one, we're new drivers. So if you're going to buy a car, it'll preferably be a used car. Because it's going to happen, you know, you're going to get dinged and, you know, that's one thing. And just, you know, do your homework, you know, and I'm sure your loved one will do their homework also for purchasing a vehicle. And I would suggest you as the parent, the wife, to begin looking into already what is an insurance going to look like. Don't wait till the last minute, because then you're going to be rushing. And I've seen it happen over and over again, right? Like, what is the insurance going to look like? They're a new driver. The points are going to be higher, however they rate it. That, and then also what other options they may have. You know, they don't need a car right away. Although if, you know, you would ask me that 5 years ago, I need a car the day I get out, right? But the, you know, the bus and the metro transportation is great. However, you know, to get around, especially here in Los Angeles, you are going to need a vehicle. But again, it all goes back to housing, because some housing, transitional housing programs are not going to allow them to have their car. So then there's also that, and then you have to think about parking. So there's that. But those are just some of the things to kind of think about and look ahead as far as your loved one, you know, purchasing or getting a vehicle. Did I miss anything?
Also, too, if your loved one has never drove before, depending on what age they went in incarcerated, I would really, really look into driving schools, honestly, because then that saves that like tension. I know I would be very nervous, which I've actually have taught many folks how to drive, and it is nerve-wracking. And I'm not a professional at it, right? So I think having a professional and just being mindful, maybe seeing what that looks like for them so they can get comfortable with the instructor and like that driving process.
It's also just a thing that causes a lot of fights. So like, don't add that to your relationship if you can help it. Yeah. Have somebody else be the person teaching them to drive.
Yeah. Well, and then they can use that vehicle too. They'll be comfortable with their vehicles to take for the driving test. It's all, and they know the steps, right? That's their business. So they know everything. Like took my license 20-something million years ago. So laws change, things change the way they test and things like that. So it's just really, I think that's very helpful. I've noticed some folks doing that for their loved one, just researching what that looks like. And maybe if it is expensive, like putting that money now aside for that if they need that.
And then we'll throw it back to the next part of that welcome home, the next 3 months portion. Is there more stuff on there that we needed to cover?
Let me see. So the banks are starting to be more friendly towards individuals with lived experience or that have, you know, have been system impacted. So getting a bank account is fairly easy. And it's just, you know, you just go in and you know, put down your deposit and open a bank account. The driver's license, you know, we talked a little bit about that with the DMV.
Can I interject about
Sure.
the bank account? Some banks, their policy is just such that someone coming out just isn't going to be able to get a bank account. So everybody goes to Chase. That's the bank that their policies will allow them to get a bank account. for those of us who have not been recently incarcerated, maybe we wouldn't bank there because their deals aren't that great, right? But it is the place where you can very easily get an account. And we actually, here in LA, even the Chase Bank branches are not created equal. Not all of them are friendly. And so now we know from sending guys to different ones which ones are friendly. So again, that's another thing to ask. But there's one in particular that wants to start a relationship even with us. And I think Bank of America is also becoming incredibly like friendly to people transitioning out. So those are kind of the two banks that this is actually part of their mission now. And so either one of those is going to be friendlier to get that bank account going.
I also say union banks are a really great place to start for first timers. I've seen them; they're great, and also that help them build credit and get car loans. Employment. So we're gonna talk a little bit about that. So I'll kind of skip that because that goes kind of the subject. The next one, yeah, the next subject. Cell phone. We talked about that. Oh, this one's good. Buy a cheap laptop. So, your loved one doesn't need a Mac Pro 3000, right? A Chromebook is great to get them started and familiarizing themselves with technology. So that'll be fine. And sometimes it could be a little overwhelming, the technology, or I should say it's common for technology to be overwhelming. So it's better just to keep things simple. Pursue education. We're gonna talk more about that. So yeah, I don't know if I missed anything.
That leads directly then into the next part. Like there are so many opportunities out here now for people who are coming out. And it is pretty county to county, but there's tons of opportunities here in LA County in particular around training and employment. And so, and then also education. So we just wanted to mention some of the big ones to you guys so you can kind of help direct them towards some of the resources that are available to them.
You want me to go over the resources or going over? Yeah, so real quick with the education, a lot of our loved ones have gotten some college credits or actually finished their AA inside, and that looks different once they do come home and want to pursue either to finish their AA or even get into their bachelor's. So when we talk about the technology piece, being that sounding board for them and their their mentor, their teacher, their helper is really crucial in being patient with that. Because what we know, we just think it's like, oh, that's just common sense. Imagine never touching it, a cell phone or a laptop. So them going back into school, I've met with a lot of folks want to do it right away, hit the ground running. But honestly, just tell them that it's always going to be there. It's okay. You can always go to school. Let them see how they're doing with technology, because I don't like setting folks up for failure when that comes into that. But for the community college level, there is a reentry organization, Rising Scholars. You have the handout in your guys' packet as well. For the Cal States and the universities is Project Rebound. And also too, if anyone's looking into any other type of training, Department of Rehabilitation will pay for their schooling. Or let's say they even want to go back and get their bachelor's or even AA, and they get financial aid, they can still, DOR will pay for them to go back to school. They'll help with their transportation, they'll help with books, whatever that their needs are, that they'll help them with that. If they want to do non-traditional schooling, if they want to do barbering, trucking, I think there's other ones that are real popular, but depending to also to being realistic on their background, what they can and cannot do. So certain things in medical field may be obsolete, but there are kind of pushing the envelope on the medical field. So I know certain x-ray techs and things like that are kind of becoming more popular. Employment, there's a lot of reentry organizations. I want to say that it is very hot out here in LA with a lot of the reentry orgs, but there are some up north. Not as much services, but a lot of the employment pieces down here in LA is LA Rise. We have the GRID program. Goodwill is a good one that does the training and employment opportunities in any WorkSource center. So no matter where you're at, WorkSource centers are very great. And CEO, Center for Employment Opportunities. They're out here in LA and in San Bernardino and in New York and other states. They're really good at training our folks into like those entry level jobs, right? And so that's another thing when we talk about expectations. I know a lot of our folks want to just jump into a career. We all do, but however, there are baby steps to get there too, and to preparing for what that looks like. And I think that's what you were going to talk about.
Yeah, I'll just talk a little bit about like the jobs versus careers. As you all know, like there's tons of jobs available, like warehouse work, street cleaning work, shipping and receiving, Amazon, and I can go on and on of logistics companies that are hiring forklift drivers, and those are good entry level positions. They're a good place to get in and get your feet wet, get used to a routine, start getting some work experience under your belt. But we always try to tell our returning citizens to start working is great, but also set up a plan. Have a vision where you can meet your goals and move forward. And not get stuck in a dead-end job, So that's, we work with them in creating those pathways. There's a lot of great programs right now that'll pay for truck driving training, so you can get your truck driver's license. There's some great organizations that if they're really interested and have the energy, the stamina, and the ability to do construction. There's the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. They have a great construction cohort program that gets them into good union jobs. There's a host of different training programs. Oh yeah, Manifest Works is another great program where individuals get trained to be production assistants. And it's a really good job. They can make up to like $76,000 a year, literally in their second year in that career field. So there is a lot of great opportunities. However, the trick is going to be for them to find a way to have the support in housing in order for them to be able to make that transition into like from a job and then onto a career. So like that's where we always see the niche, right? Like it's if they have their housing covered, they're more able to take these opportunities in these trainings in education and really prepare themselves moving forward. So that's one of the things that we try to coach our returning citizens to, is to really take their time in finding that career path and not just jump on the first work opportunity that they get, because in the long, it's good at the beginning, like, hey, I got a job, I'm excited, I'm gonna start getting a paycheck, but in the long run, how is that gonna benefit you, instead of getting this job right now and maybe going on and doing some training where you're going to start at $24, $25 an hour instead of jumping into a $15 an hour job.
Do you want to add, Darlene?
Sure. So DOR actually in addition to education, DOR does help with employment. They have employment and career coaches that you could access, that your loved one can access through DOR. And DOR is throughout the state, right? So whether you're living in Northern California or, Central California to all of the different counties in Southern California, there is a DOR available. And because an individual has been incarcerated, they are most likely eligible through that, and they have a reentry hub. They would just have to go through the application process and screening.
Well, I'd say one more thing. It's like and I noticed this just through my own experience, and again working in this field, is that, you know, it's kind of when a college kid gets out of college, or a college person graduates and they have this great degree, and then they start going from one work environment to another and another. They're kind of finding themselves. Well, as somebody with lived experience, that's almost the same pathway that it takes to find yourself. You know, I'm here. I'm a director here at Mass Liberation, but my first job was at a warehouse, packing plastics, shipping and handling. I worked for Home Depot. That was a great experience. And I also worked I worked in construction, so I got some handy knowledge there. And I actually have a degree in construction management, which I don't know what that's gonna come to. But anyways, so that, and then I learned how to do vitamins. I was making vitamins. I became a machinist making vitamins. So it's just, you know, the first year or two, that's what it is. You know, it's just, I know a couple guys right now in our program, you know, they were working in a warehouse, and then he started working at Ross, and then from Ross, he moved into roofing, and that's all it is. So just, you know, give your loved one that time to really find themselves. As long as they're motivated, they're gonna find their way. So.
I agree.
Great. And a lot of the career fields that might be popping up in conversation that you might be hearing, like, it's pretty common to go into construction because there's so many programs towards the union for that. And substance abuse counseling is another really common one, because a lot of times people are getting that training inside and even getting work experience inside doing that. And that's a really great opportunity because there are a lot of open positions. So that's a really wonderful kind of career to guide them into as well. And then in addition to that, reentry is pretty common, right? Because it's become, so many people are being released that this industry is its own career field. And so that's becoming more and more common as well.
And real quick with your loved one, if they're not involved in a reentry org like ours or any other ones, just to give them that information that here in California, ban the box, they do not have to disclose that they've been incarcerated or that they're a convicted felon or any things of that nature on the application or during their interview. So now with the fair chance hiring, you guys can go online and look that up. So it just gives that information, like what their rights are. They're supposed to be given if they, you know, the interviewer likes the person, like, I want to hire you, they give them a conditional offer letter if they do run a background. Also, to let your loved one know their background, usually it's 7 years. So if they've done more than that time, it may not come out depending on the nature of the offense. So just to give them that peace of mind when they are going to interview, there's so many great, wonderful resources that if you guys ever need it, you guys can always reach out. I have great YouTube videos, or we can coach them through that on how to interview. Because a lot of the time before it was like, how do we say our story that I was incarcerated and the things that I've done inside. Now, if it comes back, the conditional offer letter, they revoke it or they rescind it because their criminal background did come back, they still have more rights where they can do an appeal. You know, it's writing a letter, like an appeal letter. And there's a great org online. The Second Chance, what is it? Yeah, so it's, the Fair Chance Hiring Act, and they have all these forms and stuff like that. So like there are rights. So it's really a lot more about giving a person that second chance, and so that they, you know, can get hired in certain fields that they never thought they could.
And I think that's where you as a family member can be really instrumental, is providing them that hope, because a lot of times when we meet guys who just did a lot of time, you know, this has been the law for a couple of years now and they don't know that, right? And so they're kind of living in fear of that moment when they come out of prison and that they're not going to be able to get jobs. So you can provide a lot of hope to them that, you know, the job market is wide open, one, and we don't know how long that's going to be true, but right now it's pretty true. And that two, you know, backgrounds are not what they were. You know, when it comes to getting hired, they really, really are not what they were. For most jobs, if they don't need a live scan, for most jobs, their backgrounds are completely clean and they don't have to live with that, you know, tied around their neck. So just giving them that hope on a phone call is huge, and walking them through that, the change in laws, is really important. We are going to take our lunch break now. And what time is it? It's 12:35 already? Yeah, perfect. So we will come back. I'm going to bring the pizza upstairs. Actually, we're going to have it up here. And so stay settled, use the bathroom if you need to. We'll have the pizza up here actually, and just a little bit of time to mix, but we're going to make it pretty quick and try to get started back up again around 1 or 1:05. Not a super long lunch. So we'll just enjoy pizza together and come back at 1. And at that time, if you guys already have some questions brewing, that's fine, but continue to write down your questions. And you can ask us a little bit over lunch, but continue to write them down. And then we'll get back started with talking a little bit about communication and relationship stuff after lunch, which I think will be very helpful. Did you have a question, Sophia?
Actually, so I would like to invite everybody to the table round up here. There's like a little wall to the side. There are some pictures there. Can you please just take a look at that? Get that information. This is stuff that you possibly think that you don't know, but you actually know. Read it through, and I'm gonna have some handouts so that when we forward this material, it doesn't feel like it's too much. So it's that table that's right there, the stack rack. There's a little wall right there. Okay.
All right, come and then just be back here at 1, or we'll still be here, but.